Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HTML All the Things podcast, episode number 43, Imposter Syndrome. I'm your host, Matt Lawrence, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Mike Karan. Now, if you've been enjoying the podcast so far and you want to support us, there are a couple ways that you can do that. You can review us on Apple Podcasts or on the podcast platform that you listen to this on. You can also check us out on Patreon and sign up for one of the tiers that we have there. And also, probably the most important one, you can just kind of tell your friends and kind of share the news. I don't know if it's news, but like share our podcast link. Let people know that we record podcasts every single week, barring some holidays and that type of thing. And, let them know, especially if they're web developers just starting out or even more experienced, just let them know that we have a show going, and that would be really great. Harmless? It's not even harmless, is it? It's shameless self-plug over Charmless. What is it, like Charmin? That sounds like something that like Charmin would come up with. You know what I'm trying to say? Like the brand Charmin would be like, Charmless. This is Charmless. That's not bad, actually. You can have that, Charmin, if you're listening, because you probably are. Someone shared it with you. Anyway, we also have a Discord server again. So if you guys want to join up, we have a really great community that is growing relatively quickly, or faster than at least we thought it would grow, and it's quite active. And it's like people are getting help, people are starting to collaborate, people are starting to do stuff on there. So it's really great. So if you would like to join in that community, please check out the link in the full show notes, which will be on our website. And thank you to everyone who's listening, who is on the Discord right now, who's in the community. But without further ado, let's move on to the intro segment, Weekly Pain Points. Mike, take it away.
So, yeah, this is a kind of a topical weekly pain point, and I'll try not to make it too long. It'll be on Game of Thrones, so, I mean, if you're not interested or whatever, you could just zone out at this point, and I'll try to keep it quick. Game of Thrones came to its conclusion this week. Season 8 is over, and that means that the main story arc is over, and I just have some pain points about it. I'm not going to spoil anything, but what I don't like is kind of the rushed feeling of the final season. The fact that what happened in the end didn't really upset me too much. It's more the fact that it could have been done a lot better and explained a lot better and kind of, I wouldn't say stretched out, but a lot more content could have been given to us in a lot better ways than having to rush a very complicated and complex storyline in a span of 6 episodes in a final season that really deserved a lot more. So I'll give a quick little backstory on it. The fact that HBO actually asked the writers of the show, I think their abbreviation is D&D, there's 2 of them, two people, and they asked them to do a total of 14 seasons, I believe, at some point. Then George R. R. Martin kind of chimed in at some point and said like 12 would be fine. That's what he would recommend, is about 12 seasons. And these writers, with their infinite knowledge on the subject of Game of Thrones, decided that no, we'll do 8 seasons, and the final 2 seasons will actually shorten to 7 episodes and then 6 episodes respectively. This, to me, like, I just have a real big problem with this, and I don't like it in any sort of sense. Like, I don't want this to be a trend in the industry, because the writers were actually signed on to do the next 3 Star Wars movies, and this feels like a way to get out of Game of Thrones as fast as possible and move on to, I guess, a more lucrative contract with Star Wars and Disney as fast as possible. And it's kind of like slapping your fans of the show that have been watching for years now. It's been, I think, it's been around 10 years now that they've been watching Game of Thrones with you, and just slapping them in the face and be like, we're going to move on and just like get this over with as fast as possible, even though they obviously had A, more budgetary discretion, so they could have had way bigger budget, and B, they could have, put more time into this and more years and stuff like that, and everyone would have been happy. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of upset with Game of Thrones, but what are you going to do? It's over. It's fine. Matt, what about you?
So I did not watch Game of Thrones, because I have never watched Game of Thrones, barring an episode here and there. So I am completely immune to any of that, luckily, because it kind of sounds like a lot of people are upset. But anyway, my weekly pain point is formulating tutorials from my own learning. So I've been messing around a lot with Tailwind and getting familiar with it, and kind of getting to the point where I can, it's kind of like a reflex, where I just kind of know what classes to pull in, or at least know where in the documentation I need to like do a quick reference kind of thing, and just kind of know where it is and know what to bookmark, and getting familiar with it. And I'm trying to, for the first time, kind of immediately while learning it also try to write tutorials, and that's kind of been my weekly pain point, trying to learn that procedure, because usually I know it for a long time and then I write a tutorial at some point. So we'll see how this goes. I do have a bunch planned, from installation all the way through to hooking it up to Vue.js, as I said before. So let's hopefully get that ball rolling, and we'll see how it turns out. But anyway, moving on to the actual show here. It's a mic heavy episode again because I was gone for the majority of the day today. So I'm just going to introduce the segments here, and then I'm going to let Mike take it away once again. So segment number 1 is the Imposter Syndrome. Segment number 2 is tips/advice for dealing with Imposter Syndrome. And then, of course, the recurring segment, Web News, and this time it's about digital well-being, another very topical topic. So, Mike, take it away with segment number 1.
All right. Thanks, Matt. So segment number 1, Imposter Syndrome. So I just want to clarify what it is. It's a feeling like you don't belong and are not qualified to do the job that you are doing or continue in the practice or schooling that you are trying to do. So in web development terms, you're kind of, you're going about your job and you feel like you're not qualified to do that job, and you feel like you're kind of, it's an inferiority kind of feeling. And I'm sure a lot of people that have been listening to this either A, already know the term imposter syndrome, or B, have definitely experienced the symptoms of it and can't really classify it or something. So I'm hoping that this will help you classify it. So things that can kind of induce that feeling, I just want to clarify what they are so that you have, again, more insight into imposter syndrome, because knowing is half the battle. So things that can induce it, in my opinion, and what has kind of been what has induced it in me over the past couple, 5 years, I think, that we've been doing this. So one thing is coworkers talking about their work and you not understanding most of it. So they're talking about some sort of new technology over a lunch break, and you're just like, wow, I don't understand anything that they're saying, and I feel like why am I even here? Stuff like that. That kind of stuff can really make you feel like you're not supposed to be there, right? An imposter in this situation. Things like technical abbreviations, like people are talking about MERNs and LAMP stacks and API and REST and IDEs and stuff stuff that you just don't understand, and people are using it casually in conversation with each other, can really give you that feeling of what the hell, how do I not know this stuff? Constantly evolving technologies. So you're learning pure vanilla JavaScript, but there's 10 different JavaScript frameworks out there, and then tomorrow there's another JavaScript framework, and the day after that there's another JavaScript framework. So that constantly moving landscape of technology in front of you can really frighten and stop you in your tracks and give you that imposter syndrome feeling. Getting caught up in age. So this one is a little bit more complicated in the sense that let's say that you're a little bit older and you're just getting into web development, and then you take a look online and you're seeing this 18-year-old or 17-year-old that's way ahead of you in his learning process, and you're thinking why, how is he doing that? And what, I'm older now and maybe I can't compete in this industry. For that, I really want to say don't. And for all of these things, I really want to say these are just the symptom. These are just ways of inducing it. They shouldn't stop you in your learning process, in your work. This is just for your own knowledge. So you should really take these things and be like, I know now that this is just an imposter syndrome, and it's not a bad thing to feel this. That's the whole point of this episode. I want to ensure that everyone kind of has that feeling, that everyone is going through what you're going through, even on different levels of professionalism, of different levels of experience. Everyone always has that one feeling where they just oh, why am I even here? Because I don't know anything. And it's kind of a healthy feeling to have, and I'll talk about how to deal with it in the next segment, but I just want to reassure everyone that, yeah, I'm talking about all this stuff, and you probably can, relate to a lot of this, and maybe you're feeling anxious, even just hearing some of these things, but I just want to just to make sure that this isn't to do that. This is to kind of give you knowledge that it's out there and it's very documented, and people are feeling this with you right now. And just kind of get through it on your own. We kind of all get through it together. So another thing that can really induce imposter syndrome is having to Google search everything. So have that feeling that, oh, I don't understand this, I need to Google search it. And the next problem that you're solving is literally the same thing. You have to Google search it. Again, that's not a big deal. a lot of people do that. I mean, I feel like most, if not all, developers will do something similar to that. Like I know for sure for me, I will Google search the simplest things sometimes. Like, oh, what's the, how do you get the most efficient way of getting class names all into a variable in pure JavaScript? Like, obviously it's get element by class name, but sometimes I'll forget that. And that happens to me all the time, even though I use it very, very often, because sometimes I'm switching between technologies, going to jQuery, getting out of jQuery, going to Vue. And then when I come back to a technology, I'll forget it. There's no problem in Google searching it. Don't think that just because you have to Google search it, you don't know it. That's not how that works. It's just a reminder to yourself, or it's just a way of learning. And the fact that you're willing to go through the process of searching it, learning it, implementing it, or even copy pasting it is a very big step. And it's a really important actually topic to know, and it'll really accelerate your development learning process and development implementation. So don't feel like it's inferior to have to copy and paste some Stack Overflow code. It's definitely not. That's a very, very important skill. In fact, when I go through the process of working with someone, I make sure that they know how to do that step. Like they know how to Google stuff. Like they don't have to ask like every single little question. They can Google it themselves and then ask maybe some explanations later. That's kind of how I approach it. Like this topic, the Google search topic, I honestly, very important skill to have. That is not a thing that should make you feel like you're an imposter. And then the last thing here is just complex topics. Like when you're looking at algorithms, when you're looking at sorting, like what's the most efficient way of sorting, that can, or any sort of design patterns like singletons and a bunch of different words that you might not understand. That can really create a sense of inferiority and a sense of, I don't understand what I'm doing. And I just want to say, like, it's important to note that just having that feeling, that you don't understand something, it's important to just kind of embrace it, because the fact that you don't understand it, the fact that you note to yourself and are feeling kind of down with yourself to not understanding, that's a great feeling, because you can go out there and learn it. Like there's resources to learn everything. So if you're really upset about not knowing what a singleton pattern is, Google the singleton pattern, read about it and learn it and try to implement it. Like it's one of those things that, again, like I said, knowing is half the battle, and being aware that you're experiencing an imposter syndrome, knowing that this is something that everyone else is experiencing, you can kind of tackle it in many different ways and use it to motivate you to become a better programmer. So it's kind of flipping the table on something that's kind of annoying to experience. That's what I'm trying to do here. I don't know if Matt, you have anything to add to the imposter syndrome discussion.
Well, the one thing I would say is like, especially when you're talking about the complex topics thing, and I don't know whether it's like a personal thing, or like I'm sure other people experience this as well, but I'm kind of weak in this area, I would say. I don't know if I necessarily have imposter syndrome, but I have a really bad knack for when something is really complex, and I've mentioned this on the show before, that like I get pissed off before I start learning. And I don't know whether that's like a form of imposter syndrome or what that is. But how I get around it is I just eventually do it. Like I kind of have one of those moments where I'm like, I'm pissed off at a certain topic, and I'm like, all right, that's it. And then I just like go and throw it into a project. And by doing that, I'm, pulling up 1,000,001 Google articles, and I'm making sure I, test all the different stuff, and I'm maybe trying it out a couple different ways or whatever. I probably waste time getting pissed off a lot at it, is what I guess I'm trying to say. But like it's one of those things where it's not easy for anyone to overcome something that is so foreign. It's one thing, for example, if I didn't understand how classes worked in another language, I'm not going to get mad about that, because I can generally understand like, this is how a class works, and I'm going to be assigning this. I just have to learn the syntax, right? Like I kind of generally understand what that is. I understand what a loop is. I understand the basic sections. So I just have to look up like, how do I do a loop in this language? But if you're at that point where you think a loop is complex, like you're, brand new to programming, you don't know what a loop is at all. You don't know what a class is. You don't know what this is. You don't know what that is. That's like the hurdle to get over. And what I'm just trying to say is that you're not alone necessarily, and that you're not You're not alone at it. And even people who have been in technology for years, like you and I have been in tech for years. I haven't been, in web development the whole time. But even if it's like something else, I'll get annoyed or I'll get pissed off. And whether that's an appropriate response or not, that's just how I do it. I get like annoyed with it, and then I eventually like fix the problem. Like I eventually just go after it, and that's how I go after it. So you're not alone. Even people who are experienced in it, have issues here and there. And there's a lot of stuff in programming that I don't understand, and I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that I do understand that other people don't understand as well. So it's just one of those things, and I think that's kind of my main point with that. The other thing I kind of wanted to talk about too is the fact that this, not with complex topics, but with the imposter syndrome specifically, this is kind of a big problem for entrepreneurs that we're finding as well. So like obviously we're entrepreneurs, we have our own small business, and in our experience, it's typically freelancers that also get affected quite a bit because, they're independent and they're generally new to the topic. So they're new to, web development or whatever they're going freelancing for. And then they're also a new freelancer. So they're a new entrepreneur. Obviously there's, changes in that formula. Maybe you're experienced in business and not experienced as what you're selling, but whatever, right? In general, people who jump into freelancing as a junior web dev, they have like the biggest imposter syndrome. And one of the things is that this goes back to the technical abbreviations you were mentioning, where people are talking in not necessarily just the abbreviations, but they're talking in the jargon, right? They're talking in almost in code to people, right? You don't understand what the heck they're talking about. They don't understand what the heck you're talking about. It's a big mess. But one thing that helped me get kind of through this when we first started up our business is that there are people out there that literally sit there for 12 plus hours a day or 8 hours a day, whatever, a shift a day, and they only do, let's say, JavaScript. So yeah, they probably should be better at JavaScript than me because I use it to control transitions and stuff like that. At the same time, those people are probably not good at like going into QuickBooks and ensuring that my records are in there properly and ensuring that all the proofs are in there and knowing where to go, which government agency to go to pay your taxes or whatever. So it's one of those things where someone they're not necessarily arrogant, but they're like very advanced in a topic. They're advanced in that topic generally because they have like hundreds, if not thousands of hours of practice. Whereas if you're one of those entrepreneurs or those freelancers that's just starting out, you have a more general experience. So obviously that guy could, that amazing JavaScript dev could make the app probably better and faster, but he would be sitting there for hours trying to figure out how to charge his customers, or he'd be paying somebody else to deal with all of that, all the bookkeeping and everything, and he would be moving on. So if you're one that's, completely independent, remember that you have a unique formula of skills that makes you that takes away that like anyone with that formula of skills, like everyone has a unique formula of skills, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And that whenever somebody in the industry says like, oh, I'm way better at like CSS, it's like, congratulations, that's all you do. And as a final note about this as well, one of our professors or our instructors at our college, you'll remember him. He taught the last, I don't want any names, but like he taught the last embedded class for us. He said that one of the things he does is he just like forgets things intentionally. Like he'll learn something really hard, code it out, and like let's say it's like we're working with like microcontrollers, so he codes out this driver. He has that driver now. That driver's not going to change functionality. He just forgets that knowledge. And so those people that are constantly doing the same thing over and over and over again every single day aren't going to forget it, and they're going to look smarter. But you, just because you have to look it up, you know where to look it up. You know how to figure out how to do it. So you're not dumber, if you will. You're not any worse off than them. You're just not as experienced as them. I don't use Linux commands every single day, but I'm more experienced than the beginner at it, but I'm less experienced than the admin because I don't administer it anymore. So I don't know if that's a bit too long-winded, but that's kind of where I sit with the imposter syndrome thing. Everyone has a unique formula, and that's kind of my point there.
Yeah, and I fully agree with your sentiment that a lot of people, like everyone that's starting out or anyone that's been in the industry for a long time, they have their very specific set of knowledge. And yes, they might know some stuff a lot better than you. Yes, you might know a very general idea of a lot of stuff even better than them, even though they've been in the industry for long. So what I've actually seen before is a Venn diagram explaining this really well, where it shows like your knowledge and then their knowledge, and then a tiny little intersection in between where it's like common knowledge. And that's kind of how it works for any developer. Like Matt and I, we have that intersection of common knowledge for sure. But most of it, Matt's knowledge is better in a lot of other things. My knowledge is better in a lot of things. And our common intersection is very small, even though we've been working together for so many years. So imagine you compared to someone that you've never even worked with. Or imagine you compared to like a more advanced developer. Yes, it's going to be the same thing. Like your knowledge is going to be outweighing them in certain aspects, and their knowledge is going to be outweighing you in certain aspects, and you're going to have that very small little mix in between. So just keep that in mind, that applies to pretty much everyone across any field, any web development technology and stuff like that. Like, yes, obviously some have more of a larger intersection than others, but for the most part, that intersection is fairly small. And that kind of keeps us all on even playing field, if you know what I mean. Like even someone that's been in the industry for very long, yes, he's very professional at something, but you can catch up to him in a different way. So with that, I'm actually going to move on to the next segment, and that's tips and advice for dealing with imposter syndrome. So the first tip here is know the topics you are currently studying / working with really well. So, and this is kind of like going back to our advice on knowing the base of what you're doing really, really well. So starting out from a very bottom level, base level thing. So if you're starting out in web development, that would be CSS, HTML, JavaScript, or one of those. So if you're or a couple of those. So if you're starting out on the front end, maybe you just want to know how to do layouts. But what I'm saying is that know how to do those, understand how those layouts work, understand how CSS and HTML work, and understand it fairly well to the point where you understand the limitations and the strengths of that core subset. So research it, do your experiments, do your template pages, do your portfolio work. Understand what you're doing really, really well, because that base is not only gonna help you understand those topics, but it's gonna help you understand the next topics, because you'll know how to learn. And that's kind of, I like to link it up to what school is for, what education is for. I don't think it's for the actual knowledge that you get from it. Yes, you do get some interesting knowledge of like different algorithms and stuff like that. But what really teaches you how to do is pick up new topics quickly. And that's really the most important thing about education, the most important thing about school. So if you already know how to pick up new topics really quick, you're already ahead of a lot of people that are just going through school right now. And that's important to know. So it's like, if you're thinking about, should I go to university? Should I not? Maybe that's a good weighing option for you. Like, are you good at learning how to learn, essentially? If you are good at that, maybe a better way for you to advance in your career is just to go in head first and start doing projects and try to get a job in the industry. And this is strictly speaking to web development, obviously. In a lot of different industries, you can't really do this. You have to go to school. But in web development specifically, if you're already at that good base of knowing how to learn a topic, you're already ahead of a lot of people that are in school and out of school and stuff like that. So that's a really important one. I want to say is, learn the basic topics really well that you're learning right now. So if you're just starting out with CSS, HTML, or just JavaScript, learn it really well. And that'll teach you how to learn the next topics even better. The next thing here is have a good understanding of the tools you use. So your IDEs, your CLIs, your version control, have a good understanding of how to use those tools. So because without knowing the tools, it'll be tough to understand the tutorials that you're going to need to read, the tutorials that you're going to need to watch, and the guides that you're going to have to go through, and the articles and stuff like that. You have to understand what people are referring to when they're referring to a CLI or command line interface, what they're referring to when they're referring to VS Code and extensions, what they're referring to when they're referring to syntax, when they're referring to emit or autocomplete in the codes, debugging in your code editor. Like, you want to understand those things, and when you understand the base knowledge of what the guide is talking about, it's a lot easier to continue on and keep learning. Because if you have to kind of stop and Google every little bit, which is completely fine. Again, like if you're going through a guide for the first time and you don't understand certain aspects of it, it's completely fine to stop and, get a good base knowledge of the stuff that you don't understand before you continue on. I recommend doing that, but it'll accelerate you even faster if you understand the tools, because again, those guides will have some some assumed knowledge is expected usually. It's like very limited, but it's still expected. I like to kind of give an analogy of like a carpenter needs to understand how to use a hammer before he can figure out how to build a shed. So it kind of makes sense in that way. It's a little bit different, obviously, for web development because there's so many tools. There's so many different, like a hammer is a hammer, but there's a million different IDEs. There's a million different command line interfaces and version control tools and stuff like that. But essentially, it's the same thing. Know the very most popular or very basic tools really well before you get into it.
And to build off of that too, like sometimes you think you know a tool worse than others because you kind of make up terms for yourself within the software. And this is for your own understanding, especially if you're just starting out. So maybe you might call the settings menu something like the left menu, or you call a git commit the commit thing, that type of stuff. Like it's important to eventually kind of get the terminology down pat, especially if you start working with a team or start working with others. But at the same time, just because you call git commit the commit thing doesn't mean you know it any worse. You're just not quite there with the terminology. You clearly understand what commit is, when to do it, and when to sort of use it, sort of thing. So kind of keep that in mind as well, because I'll personally do this quite often, where I will kind of ignore a lot of the more technical jargony terms, I guess it is, in certain things, and I'll just be like, oh, where do I like paste this? Oh, I go to like the weird looking like duck icon or whatever it is, right? For whatever software it is, and then I like slowly learn, and then eventually it's like, oh yeah, that's the clipboard icon, that's the paste button, something like that is a really simple example. So don't keep yourself down if you don't understand all the terms yet, because that's, in my opinion, one of the last steps. Understanding it is kind of the main thing, because you can always sort of adapt your language over time.
Yeah. So, and then the next tip here is help others and help other developers and become a mentor yourself. So no matter where you are in your programming journey, you're probably and like almost 100% likely to be ahead of at least someone else. And someone else would love to be able to pick your brain and ask you questions. And what this does is, like, anytime, I don't know if you've ever taught anyone, I don't know if you've ever answered anyone's questions. As soon as you answer a question or teach someone, it solidifies the knowledge that you have. So it's a two-way helping process. So you're helping someone else, and you're also helping yourself by solidifying the knowledge you have. And being able to, like, when you're able to explain something, that means you really understand it. So that I like to recommend doing this. Like I always am there for people to answer questions. And this is kind of another plug for our Discord community. We've been really active on there, and there's a lot of other people that are very, very good at answering questions on there. And if you have any questions, you can ask there. And there's definitely opportunity to answer questions on there at a very base level. There's a lot of people that are just starting out, just as probably a lot of you, the listeners out there, are. So just keep that in mind. And that really brings me on to my next tip, is to get yourself a mentor as well, and join an active or join an active developer community. So it doesn't have to be our Discord. It can be any other developer community out there. There's plenty of them out there. I just, like, the only plug that I would say for our Discord is, like, we're just starting out, so there's a very limited amount of people on there, and there's a very good core community already being formed, and you're probably not going to get drowned out like in a lot of other larger communities. But again, there's plenty of other communities out there, so you don't have to be pigeonholed into just ours. Definitely like join multiple ones. I know a lot of people in our community have joined many others, and they benefit from that knowledge, and we benefit from it as well, because they bring that knowledge back to us. So it's kind of one of those things. Put yourself out there is really hard to do, but if you get yourself someone that's willing to give you advice on a day-to-day basis and answer your questions, and like give you kind of like that encouragement when you're really needed, when you're having this like imposter syndrome effect, especially, it's really going to make it easier for you to move on in your career and your education and your schooling, or your own self-learning, and not get like hit that wall where you're like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. Because that's really what I want to avoid people doing. So if you're listening to this, please, like, if you're at that point where you're just like, I don't want to do this anymore, just keep going at it, because there's just need for more web developers. There's need for more programmers out there. Trust me, whatever programming level you're at, whatever you do, you have that niche to fill, for sure. Like you have that knowledge that someone else doesn't have, or you have that knowledge that can be useful in a certain project that we could definitely use. So I just want to really build the community of web developers out there. We want more of you. We want more people to continue on learning web development and helping each other and stuff like that. Next point here would be become comfortable with the fact that you will not know everything, but have the confidence to tackle any problem or technology you encounter. And this one's tough. Obviously, it's kind of like, well, there's a lot of different technologies and I want to know everything, but you have to understand that there's just no way for you to be an expert or even know about everything that's out there. But the point of that second part is have the confidence to tackle is that if you know that there's a lot of stuff out there and if you're constantly learning, you know that learning anything that comes at you during any process, so any problem that you have or any new technology that you have, you can learn it and you can implement it. Just have that confidence that it's not something that's not overcomable. Like you can overcome any obstacle that someone throws at you, that your employer throws at you, or the schooling throws at you, or whatever. Like you can overcome that obstacle because you've learned the base technologies, or you've learned a couple of different frameworks at this point, or you've learned just the basic JavaScript and CSS. You just have to apply that knowledge again and learn the next thing. And usually it's a lot easier once you have that base. Once you've already learned the first parts, it's way easier to go into a framework or a library. Like you can learn those things fast, not like learning JavaScript from the beginning, obviously, or not like learning CSS or HTML from the beginning. Those are kind of the slow, meticulous processes that you have to take and you have to kind of grind through. If you've already done that, great. If you're going through that, keep going, because once you grind through it, you will have that skill of being able to learn the next thing that's going to come at you. Next thing here is keep up to date with web development news and trends. And I kind of like to do this. I read a lot of news. I go on dev.to. We'll have that linked in the show notes. And also I follow a couple of Reddit web development communities. One's r/webdev, and then the other is r/web_design. They seem to be really on top of the newest trends, like any news that breaks that affects us as web developers. They break any really important frameworks that come out that people seem to be using a lot. They'll talk about a lot. So you'll be reading through and you'll see mention of something like Vue.js, and you'll be like, okay, well, whatever. I've read it once. That's probably not interesting. But then you'll see it again and again and again. You'll be like, okay, well, maybe that's something that I should at least read up about. I'm not saying learn the whole process of how to implement and stuff like that. But if you're in the industry and if you're stagnant in, like, if you're working at an agency and they're only using one stack, like just doing WordPress sites or something, I think it's still important to kind of get out there and learn what's happening in the industry. Otherwise, you're going to have that feeling of stagnation. You're going to all of a sudden be in the sense of being an imposter, like feeling imposter syndrome happening. So this is kind of a way to help alleviate that, because as soon as you know the technology, at least if someone mentions it in a conversation or in an email or something like that, you will have heard of it. You can go in and look it up a little bit more. You know what they're referring to. It helps alleviate that for sure.
And another thing I think we can add to this as well is just actually just in general, stop receiving feedback from fellow entrepreneurs, especially if you're new. And I know that kind of sounds controversial because you're like, of course, I want a mentor and I want this and I want that. Of course, I'm not saying don't ask for help and advice. Like, I absolutely agree. You should be asking for help. You should be asking for guidance through difficult tasks. And like with fellow entrepreneurs, hopefully, because they have the experience that you're going through. They've already been through it generally, so then they can help you through it. However, just don't ask for feedback based on performance, I guess, is more specifically what I'm after. And that is because it's most likely just going to make you think that you're doing terribly in comparison. If someone's been in the industry for just 2 years even, and you're just joining, they're 2 years ahead of you. They've already registered their business. They know generally what's going on. They've already been through a tax season or two. They know all these new technologies. They generally understand the customer base if they've been trying to cater themselves to wherever their area is, if they're trying to do, services in the area, or whether they're trying to go online and go widespread. Like, they generally know what technologies people want, what they're using, what good procedures there are for customers, how to make customers understand things. Like, these are all skills that you learn, via mentoring and via actually having experience, which is the most valuable, is that experience part. But by asking them, how are you guys doing? You might be making like $4,000 a year. They're going to be making maybe 20, let's say, because they're brand new as well. But that's still that's still 5 times more than what you're making. And so you're just going to think like, oh, I must suck because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. It's like, well, no, you're also way behind. You didn't learn all these other skills, let alone just have more hours in it, and like literally hundreds of hours in it. If we assume that the an entrepreneur is only doing 40 hours a week, which is generally low, but like let's just say it's 40 hours a week, that's still hundreds of hours more than you in a given topic. If you think about it in terms of a school semester, if you're coming out of school and you're coming out of school and you want to go into like a freelancer field or that type of thing, if you think about it, how much time were you really spending on an individual class in an individual semester? Generally speaking, it's 4 months. If you're in terms of the Canadian college system, it's approximately 4 months, and it's like maybe one max 3 classes, which are maybe 3 hours maximum. So let's say there's 3 classes max at 3 hours each per week, and then you have like some homework on there. But like that's not 40 hours. And these people have been working on these skills 40 hours a week minimum for 2 years. So just keep that in mind. Ask for their guidance, ask for their help, but do not ask about the performance, because you're just going to think that you're doing terribly.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think a more general, like my more general advice on that one would be stop comparing yourself directly to other developers or other entrepreneurs. Like you said, everyone's at a different level. Even if they've started at the same time, comparing yourself to someone is kind of, it might give you that imposter syndrome. So I completely agree with what you're saying, Matt. Just kind of don't stay in your own bubble, but make sure to not fully directly compare yourself with everyone that you see. Just know that everyone takes a different journey to it, and that your journey is just as valuable as all the other journeys. And you'll find your method will be a little bit different than everyone else's. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, but it's still going to get you where you want to go if you're dedicated and you get that experience and you kind of plow through all your obstacles. That's the most important thing. Just be kind of ready to just go through any sort of problems that arise, and don't let these kinds of feelings of insecurity or inferiority stop you from learning and expanding in the field. But I think with that, I think we're good to go on the imposter syndrome topic. Hopefully everyone learned what it is. I think that's the main point of this discussion. Know that there's something out there called imposter syndrome, and that you're not the only one experiencing it. Almost everyone else has experienced it at some point or is experiencing it right now. Try to mitigate it as much as you can. It's important to not, delve into these things too much, and just to keep on doing what you're doing. Keep learning, keep expanding in your career. With that, I think we'll move on to web news. And this week, the web news is digital well-being. So just what digital well-being is, it refers to how much time we spend looking at screens and devices, and how it affects us and what we do on them and stuff like that. So as web developers, we don't really have to have a way to mitigate how much we look at a screen, because it's part of our jobs. Like right now, I'm surrounded by screens, and that's part of my job. We can, however, try to adjust our environments to kind of provide a better lifestyle while working with screens. So one of the things that I do is I like to take my laptop outside for short amounts of time and just work outside, sitting in a lounge chair or a zero gravity chair or just on a table. And sometimes like I go to the botanical gardens that are local to here, and it's great. That's a great place to work. I mean, not everyone has that opportunity, but if you do, definitely try out going to different little places around the city. And taking out your laptop and doing either your research there, or maybe doing some coding, whatever you can do on your laptop. Another thing that really helps me is having a clean environment around me, so having my setup be aesthetically pleasing to me. And everyone has different, obviously, expectations for aesthetics, so it might be different for you, but for me it's like minimal distractions as much as I can, because I already have a million other distractions in the forms of screens around me. Like right now, why I'm doing this digital well-being section is because I have currently a 10-inch Android tablet, a iPad sitting like just staring at me with a bunch of information and testing stuff going on, a MacBook that's sitting on my desk, and then 3 monitors, my microphone, my keyboard, my mouse. Like it's a lot of stuff, but that's all I have on my desk. Like I don't have any needless little trinkets or toys. I just have like a pen and paper just to scribble some stuff, and that's it. So I try to keep at least what I can manage to a minimum. Because everything else is kind of unmanageable, and there's nothing I can do about it because this is just part of my job. But that helps me kind of sit down at my desk and feel good about coding. If I come in the morning and my desk is a mess and there's a million cups around and there's a bunch of, paperwork, like banking paperwork on my desk, that makes me anxious, and I feel like that it doesn't ruin my day, I would say, but it definitely delays the time that I would take to spin up in the morning, because I have to clean up my desk and fix everything. So I try to keep it as clean as possible, and that works on a varying level. So then another thing is that I try to take breaks away from the screen or the computer. So, I work for like 45 to an hour straight, and then I'll go and take like a 5 to 10 minute break, maybe go downstairs, pour a cup of coffee, maybe just go outside for a little bit, just walk around. Like I literally just kind of turn my mind off sometimes. And that's not every break. Obviously, I can't, like sometimes I'll go on Twitter, sometimes I'll do that. Like I can't control that, but I try to at least a few times a day step away completely from the screen during work time, and give myself a little bit of time to reset. The other thing is that the blue light from monitors has now been directly linked to how well you sleep and how well you kind of how your eyes. It affects your day-to-day feel, like energy levels. And I've noticed that I've been using like a night light type feature where it kind of takes the blue light away from my screen during the evening, so when the sun goes down. So as I'm winding down before I go to bed, my screen is kind of more warm and yellowish, and that I have noticed that it has helped me fall asleep faster, and my eyes aren't as strained as they were before. So stuff like that, like blue light, maybe get yourself like some blue light glasses. I know that glasses definitely work. We don't have any sponsors right now, but I know I've heard other people mention Spectrum glasses, so you can try those out. Maybe they'll work for you for minimizing blue light and helping your eye strain and stuff like that. And then the other thing is just keep yourself keep yourself aware that there's other methods out there. Like maybe for your evening time, try to limit the amount of time you spend with screens. So if you're already spending all day on a monitor, like I understand this is kind of hard to do because a lot of us, some of us are into gaming. I know Matt likes to game, so you can't really, like, that's his hobby. He likes to do that. So you can't really limit the amount of time he spends on screens even after work. But a lot of us, maybe you have a different hobby, like, you work out or you go for walks or whatever your hobby is. You work with, you work in the shop in the evening. I think that it would be nice to have that kind of balance. I myself am not really that balanced, and I've been trying to do that a little bit. Like I do go for walks. I do go like to the gym to work out a little bit and stuff like that. But I have found that I do spend a lot of time after work on screens as well, and that's probably not the greatest balance in my life. But I mean, if you're out there and you can kind of limit that, I'm sure that will have a positive effect on your life. So Matt, how do you keep yourself sane with so many screens?
So this is actually kind of weird because it's a little bit opposite, or some of the points are going to be directly opposite of you. So number one, I do not have a clean desk. Right now I got a bunch of paper on my desk. I got two random wall wart things for other power lines. Didn't even know what they were. I have two phones. I got a Key 2. I got a S8 Plus in front of me. I got two monitors. I got a tablet to my right. There's a laptop, but it's in the bag back there, which is sometimes on my other side as well. So I got screens all over the place. Now, I do actually turn them down and typically have the orange light thing on, or the blue light filter on. A little bit lower than most people. I have some pretty bad floaters in my right eye, and this actually happened, or at least it seemed like it happened as a result of eye strain. It was like a particularly bad month where, like, my eyes years ago just used to hurt all the time. Like 100% of the time, my eyes just hurt. And it got to the point where I didn't even realize they really hurt because I was just used to them being hurting all the time. And then there was like 1 month where it was like particularly bad, and like I started getting floaters in both my eyes. Now, as far as I know, floaters are like basically permanent. But like if the screen is really bright, all I see is like this like spider web across my eye. Which is really annoying. So my screens are generally pretty dim, and they do have the blue light on. And I keep saying orange is because the screen kind of gets like an orangish tinge over it if you haven't used them yet. And I do have that on my phone at all times, and I have it on my side monitor all the time, and then my main monitor only the timed one, like at night or whatever. But the brightness is down. They're not like super dim or anything. Like everyone can use it, but just a little bit dimmer than normal. And my eyes don't generally hurt as much anymore. My TV is rather bright, but I sit kind of far away from it, so that's fine. Like you said, I game quite a bit, so weekends and evenings after working, like, I mean, I can't game on the blue sky above. I have to I have to use a screen. I can't like use something else. So I plugged into a screen literally all the time. Now this isn't necessarily by design, but when we were in college, one of the things I think I said in the first or maybe the second semester, so I don't think I'd met you yet, Mike, but I remember I was talking to our one buddy Anthony, and I remember I said, I'm like, if we look at this, I'm like, I bet you in 10 years, everywhere we look will be a screen where it constantly has information for us. And he said, no, you're crazy. And this past weekend I was in Toronto and I was walking around Union Station. Every single billboard that was in there is now digital. It's now a screen. There are screens almost always in view. Buy a car, be safe, do this, do that, have savings, do this, save for your retirement, buy this car, go to this hotel, fucking take this train. There are screens literally everywhere. So the reason why I mention this is because I'm kind of on I really like having constant digital information kind of like flooding into me. Now, sometimes it's too much and I will take, a break, as you say, like I do take breaks. I will kind of like get up, walk around the house or whatever. But I will say that I'm more of a person that I want screens constantly in front of me. I want to constantly be looking at stuff. Like I'll just go watch a YouTube video, then I'll be on like a Plex, then I'll be on Netflix, then I'll be working, then I'll be playing a game. So I don't know whether it's because like half of my screen time, let's say, or like a quarter of it or whatever it is, whatever the percentage is like leisure time. I don't know whether that's the reason why screens don't bother me as much. I don't really know. However, I will say that the blue light filters do help my sleep. I did used to like not be able to sleep or not be able to fall asleep very fast. So I do fall asleep much faster now that I have the dimmer brightness and the blue light filters on. So that definitely does help. In terms of the environment, again, like I said, there's just stuff all over my desk. I think that might just be how I have always worked. I don't know whether it's considered unhealthy digitally, but I will say that I can kind of see myself like, I think I do my best work, and I think this ties in. I don't know if it does. I'm not like a doctor or a psychologist by any means, but I do my best work when things are like really batshit crazy, if that makes sense. Like when people are like, you go here, call this guy, go this, do that, and it's like just crazy like multitasking. Like sometimes there's a point in which I'm like, all right, and I'll just start like going crazy and doing all this stuff. Now, sometimes obviously the stress is too much or whatever, but I do say that anytime I do like my really best work is when things go crazy. Like today is a prime example. I had to deal with some family stuff, and so Mike had to deal with the show notes that you're reading now or the majority of the show notes anyway. But I was supposed to be doing them. I was also supposed to be doing 4 other things, but instead I ended up like driving people around, showing up in 3 places that I didn't even know I was supposed to be, canceling all my plans, coming home. Right after this is done, I got to like fly back over to the city. Then when I come home, I got to come back, and then I got to edit this. Like, this is when sort of I like kind of wake up and kind of kick in and kind of get energy from my work. Now, whether, and this is why I mentioned this, whether the fact that I'm constantly bouncing between tasks means I'm kind of taking small breaks in between screen time, whether that is the reason why I'm good at that is because it's healthy for me to take those little breaks in screen time because I'm jumping tasks, I don't know. Maybe that's the reason. But that's just sort of how I am, and that's sort of why my desk is such a mess, because I'm kind of scatterbrained. Like, I got a hard drive here with some stuff in it. I got an old laptop backup. I got a Sega Genesis portable over here that I forgot about. I just found on the desk here. Like, this is great. You said there's no toys on the desk. I got a dog here. I don't know where that came from. I got a Mysterious Stranger toy from Fallout right here. I got a RIM Innovator Award that I found at a flea market. Like, what's going on here? I got a fidget cube. There's aspirins in here. Like
I mean, like, there's everyone's different, right? I think the thing with productivity and how our digital well-being works is that everyone has different strategies for it. I'd actually love to hear from the audience if you're kind of more along the lines of myself, where you like a clean aesthetical environment, or you're more matte-ish, where you like just chaos and your desk is just a variety of a lot like things that kind of interest you and stuff like that. I believe that both are viable. I'm just like, my own method is my own method. Your method is your own method. As long as it works, as long as you feel like you're productive during your work time, I think that that's the most important thing. And adjusting your lifestyle to get there, to be able to not only be productive all like during your work time, but then have a way to recharge yourself and then come back the next day and then be productive again. That's the goal, right? Like the problem that I know that a lot of people have is they just get burnt out really quickly. So like they can't even last a week, or they can't, after years and years and years, they'll just start draining, and they won't be able to keep up any sort of pace of work that is needed in our jobs, right? I'm kind of there with you in the chaos environment, like when there's just a lot to do. I also tend to thrive on that, but I think there's a balance to it. What I honestly think is that I like that sometimes, like once a week, something like that. Like that kind of rejuvenates me as well. Like I like not only during it, but after it, you kind of get that euphoric feeling of like, oh, I've actually accomplished something. I've accomplished like A, B, C, D. Like I've accomplished a bunch of stuff because there was panic and I solved the panic. But I think if on an everyday basis, that would be something that would cause burnout. I don't know if that's actually like if it'll actually happen to you. And I know that everyone's different, but for me, I think that if I were to have an everyday job like that would require me to panic on a daily basis, where I would just have like 15 different things that I have to do at one time and 15 different people calling me trying to solve their problems at one time, that would be the point where, after a few months of that or a year of that, I'd probably just, stop doing what I'm doing and move on to something else in my life. I need a sort of balance with it. I do enjoy it. Like I said, I do like it sometimes because it gives me, helps me stay organized and stay on top of everything. But yeah, I think it's a balance.
Well, another thing that's really important, I think, too, is like as a baseline, like me taking breaks from the screen are absolutely necessary. Making the screens so that they're not as hard on my eyes are absolutely necessary. Me probably recognizing my eyes were burning all the time back a few years ago would have probably or should have been necessary, like earlier than I did. Stuff like that. Taking breaks and all that stuff is, I think those are like clear 1-to-1. Everyone should do those, whether the breaks vary in length and in how many and how like common they happen during the day or whatever, however that variance works out. I definitely agree that those things are sort of like a baseline, like, hey, chill, like let's take a break, let's calm down, let's get this done, and let's do whatever. Right. The one thing I will say, though, is that, and I don't know whether it's the same with you, is that my desk is maybe chaos and that type of thing, but I am digitally very organized. There's a couple of things in my life that are kind of disorganized, like sort of like some stuff with, like that I've had issues maybe with syncing in the cloud. I have duplicates of stuff, but in general, like I can take all my computers, literally throw them in the garbage, and I have all my data. I know where it is. It's all filed. It's if it's not in one place, it's in another. Like those are my most unorganized places. It's not like I have stuff literally thrown everywhere. Generally, my desktop is more or less empty. If not, it has one row or one column down the side on the left or whatever. Like I'm not a person that has like files all over their desktop. I have extremely clean servers. I try to clean them up. If I like mess up a configuration, sometimes I'll just wipe the server and just like redo it again. If I think I've like, messed around with it too much, and I'm like, oh, this server's just going to be a mess now. Sometimes I'll just wipe that server and just redo it. Like I am very clean digitally. Now, whether that helps my digital well-being, I mean, it probably does, but like how much that helps, I don't know. Also, I say I do my best work during that panic, but I 100% agree. If I was waking up every single day and it was like a panic like that, I would definitely be being burnt out. And one thing I can think of is, like, if you think about, like, you wake up in the morning every single day, sometimes you just have a headache, or sometimes you just don't feel well. You're not like deathly ill. You're not going to call in or whatever, but you just don't feel great. Imagine having the stress of having to perform at your best every single day at maximum speed all the time for all these people, talking to people when you have a headache or when you're just not feeling that great. Those high-speed, extremely stressful jobs will wear you down because you'll hit those days, probably, in my opinion, more and more and more. I'm not a doctor, again, not a psychologist, but in my opinion, it's like those days come because maybe you ate something bad or like maybe you were just stressed out. But if you keep like beating yourself up, it's bad. But I will say, like I said, my best work comes from those days, probably because it's like, I'm kind of, chill during my work day. I get stuff done, of course, I'm productive, whatever. But then it's like when those moments come, I'm kind of ready and I'm like, all right, let's do it. But if that was just not a moment, but it was just my actual general workplace all the time, every day, I think I would probably go insane. So I don't know whether that's digital well-being like related or what that is. because like, I mean, that can apply really to any job. You know what I mean? Like, you could have a stressful work environment at a different job. You don't have to be a guy who's working in, you know, in programming or in marketing or whatever, like, or a related web development field, SEO, what have you. You know, you can have those stressful jobs like in a mine. You can have those stressful jobs, I don't know, laying concrete, whatever, right? And so I think it may be like, that's why I mention it, is I think it might be escaping digital well-being a bit. It might just be going into more general well-being. But I think generally what it is, though, is you're right. Like, try to find a job where you're not getting like screwed over every day, I think is probably the best way to put it. You know, make it so that your job doesn't have to have it so that you're at your best every single day. Because even though some people will be like, well, I'm always at my best. Well, that's horse shit, because you're not. Like, you're not, though, right? I don't know what your opinion is on that, Mike, but like, you're not at your best every single day.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, if you wake up in a panic every day, then you're probably not in the right place for you. Some people thrive. Well, okay. Some people are really good at waking up in a panic and they can do it for longer than others. I don't think it's an everlasting thing. I think that you will get burned out no matter who you are, but I think some people are better than others in that kind of situation. It's tough. Like, we've had situations where we've kind of had those panic, like at the first little bit, at the start of our careers, the start of this company, we had like that website with having to wake up at 1 a.m. every day for like, at least for me. And then I had to field a phone call from Russia and have to, you know, have that conversation in Russian. And I'm like, Russian is a language I can speak, but it's not my first, like, English is definitely my stronger language. So I had to, you know, adapt every day, and it was usually a panic call. And that went on for, I think, months at that time. So that was definitely a trying time, and it was definitely hard for me because I was still learning the web development industry and I was still learning how to do everything. And then I also had that panic on top of that of just having those things. And I had a couple times, not only was it just like an everyday thing, it was like a middle of the night thing a couple times where I had to leave my phone on because something could go wrong, and it's a very delicate industry. And if something went wrong, I had to wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. and quickly fix it while people are typing at me saying that everything's down and everything's a disaster at this point. So I've definitely lived through that kind of experience, and I don't want to go back to it. I've very deliberately tried to avoid those kinds of projects. The current contracts that we're on are they are high pressure and they are complicated, but the clients that we work with are understanding, and we kind of communicate very well back and forth together. So if we have those days where we wake up with a headache, we don't have to push ourselves to be the best that we possibly can that day. We can kind of take it a little bit easier, and then the next day make up for that time that we had off. Because in the long run, it's my understanding that if you kind of do that to yourself on a consistent basis, if you push yourself on a consistent basis to the extreme, and you have those breakdowns sometimes, that will make you a worse worker in the end. Whereas if you prolong your career and you make it so that you don't have high stress every single day, you'll not only become a better developer as you go, but you'll be able to do it for longer. So that's kind of where I'm trying to aim. And digital well-being or not, it's still well-being, the well-being conversation. And we got to aim to not only be the best, but be able to do it for a long time, because we have to support our families, we have to support ourselves, we have to, we're in a world that has to make money, so you have to do it somehow. And I like my job. Like, I like doing web development. I like JavaScript. I like doing all these framework stuff. I like learning new things. I like the imposter syndrome sometimes, just bringing it back to the episode topic. I like all that. And I also like to be stressed sometimes, to be honest. But again, it's that balance. And I think with digital well-being, it's also that balance of how much can you really balance your digital life, whether that be actually social media as well, is something that I wanted to quickly touch on. Social media really drains me digitally if I'm on it constantly. So if I'm constantly posting on Instagram or Twitter, that to me is a kind of a drain on my digital well-being, I've noticed. So I need to balance that as well with all my other, screens and stuff like that. So it's definitely a delicate balance. Still trying to figure it out. I'm not 100% there yet, that's for sure, but I hope that at least knowing about digital well-being and knowing that there's ways to mitigate your, eye strain and your mental state of just constantly being around screens. There's ways to do that, and we can always try to help each other. So let us know how you manage it yourselves. I'm curious how everyone else kind of mitigates this.
And I think that maybe social media stuff like that is sort of a topic all on its own. But I will say the same thing, kind of as a closing note for myself, is like I will say that I do find some things draining, and it takes me a little while to find out that they're draining. And so there's been like a few times where I've been like just a few weeks even where I just like, I'm doing my work, whatever, I'm fine, I'm not sick, but I just find myself like, oh Jesus, like I just, you know what I mean, just like I don't want to do this. And then I'm just realizing like, oh, I'm like strangely like I've strangely used Facebook a lot this week, so I'm out of here. Like I just won't use Facebook for a little bit. And like same goes with like our Instagram and stuff. Like I like posting on Instagram and all that stuff. Like that's fine. But I was like, when we were really trying to, obviously we're still trying to build the audience. We're only at like around 1,200 something. But it's one of those things where I was on it all the time to try to like learn it too, right? I was learning what to post and learning what to hashtag and learning all the little intricacies, where I was on it so much where I was just like, God, like I don't want to look at pictures anymore. Like, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things where I don't know if it's repetition or whether it's because you're on social media, you're kind of always seeking approval because you're trying to get likes and you're dealing with their changes and stuff. And it's like, I don't want to look at these pictures anymore. Like, I don't want to look at these things. I don't want to like anything anymore. Like what am I doing? And so like last few weeks I've been like sort of balancing it, where, I kind of just go on here and there and I'll like a few pictures and comment, and then I'll like post. Like I'm not necessarily posting all the time. Like I used to a bunch, and I kind of want to get back to doing a little bit more consistent, but at the same time, it's like our follower count's still going up. We're not getting complaints from people. Our followers aren't like dipping down to nothing, very specifically. Our listens are still fine and that type of stuff. It's just, I think social media calls you too much. And that'll be my kind of closing note, is I think that like screens always call you, right? But you could do a whole bunch of stuff on screens, play games, social media. You can, I just got an email from a hotel. You can rate hotels. You can, do whatever, answer email, make a podcast, whatever. But with social media, it's like you're there to give approval, seek approval, or complain for the most part, right? And some people are there to laugh and look at memes or whatever. Fine, but generally speaking, a lot of it is for those three things I just mentioned. And so I think it's just sort of a non-organic way to interact. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm not going to quit it. I'm not recommending anyone quit it. But I will say that it's strangely draining, and I don't know why. If that makes sense. So that's my closing note on digital well-being, because I think that I'm sure there'll be a web news in the future where we just solely talk about social media stuff, because that's a whole friggin' like bucket of worms that we could jump into. I don't even know if that's the right thing. Yeah. Bucket of worms.
Yeah, I think that's
all right. Hopefully, correct me on social media if you if I'm wrong there. But I don't know whether you have anything else to say, Mike, about this topic.
Nope. Roll her up.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on the platform of your choice. You can follow us on the socials via @HTML All the Things. That's on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow us @HTML Everything on Twitter. We are on Medium. We are on GitHub. And remember, we have a Discord community that is just kicking off and is quite active right now. So jump into that if you're interested. And remember, we also have a Patreon, which can be found at patreon.com/HTML All the Things. Check out the tiers and give that a go. And many thanks to our $3 tier patron, Sean from RabbitWorks JavaScript, and you can find his channel at youtube.com/RabbitWorksJavaScript. And remember, his link will be in the description, and works is spelled WERKS, not the regular way. And remember to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and we are signing off.